Right, this is a really weird podcast to do, to be honest. After I did the very first episode by myself, I didn't really expect to do it by myself again. But with the Giants live comps and travel and all that sort of stuff, it's just not been viable for this week and maybe next week to get a guest on. So, as people may have seen, I put on Instagram for people to ask me stuff they wanted to talk about. Ideally, not about coaching stuff necessarily. I think there's so much information on the internet about coaching and technique work. And, I said sort of all along that this podcast isn't about coaching necessarily. It's about people, people's stories, what people do, and what people get up to. So, bit of a strange one, but hopefully it's enjoyable. Hopefully people like it, because there's probably going to be more of them. So I have very professionally screen recorded everyone's questions and answers. Well, questions, I suppose. So I will be looking at my phone and inevitably getting slightly angry at my phone whilst it decides what I want to look at. But quite a lot of the questions have been about my journey, partly as a fat man and partly as a coach. So, and like childhood and loads of stuff. So I think what we'll do is sort of get into it. Sort of 2.5 years ago, I was sitting at 182 kilos was the last thing I remember seeing on scales. I think I got fatter than that. So 182 kilogram in pounds for American viewers is 401.2 pounds. So I was quite hefty. Part of that was through being really fortunate with the people I coached. I was coaching Paul Smith at the time. And I panicked a little bit as a coach going out to World's Strongest Man as someone who was like reasonably strong for a normal person, but nowhere near like actually strong compared to the guys I was around. And when you're walking around with Brian Shaw and Big Z and Thor and people like that, it's really easy to feel really small. So I made the mistake of getting fat instead of just getting bigger sort of through training. Luckily, I trained really hard anyway. I've always, sort of whatever I've done, I've trained as hard as possible. So I was sort of healthy, but I was fat, if that makes sense. So then I decided that it was time to get some weight off. I went to a local MMA and wrestling gym, and they said the heaviest weight category ends at 125 kilograms. So if you want to compete, that is what you have to weigh. So what I did was essentially stop eating. I sort of dropped down to like 500 calories a day. Really not a sensible way to lose weight at all. But, I'm sort of into the Jay and Blakely school of thought that if you're going to do something, you might as well suffer whilst you're doing it. You either gain weight really hard and fast, or you lose weight really hard and fast. So it worked. I lost quite a lot of weight. I think I got down to like 135, 140 in a fairly stupid way, and then started working sort of more properly with a nutritionist. At the start of losing all that weight, I'd got some advice from Shannon Clifford, who sort of knows what she's doing, but I wasn't ready to be told what to do. So she gave me nutrition plans and I ignored them and just stopped eating and trained really hard. Loads of cardio, loads of like really hard cardio. So really not sensible at all, but the weight came off. From there, sitting like 135, 130-ish, Went back to wrestling and sort of made the decision that I wanted to compete. Ended up competing in the English Freestyle Wrestling Championships and came fourth, which was also sort of last. But yeah, made 125 comfortably. I think I weighed in at like 124.8 or something. And, you know, for anyone who competes in a weight class who's further away than that, then, you know, you've probably cut a bit too hard, which I could have got a lot lower, but I wanted to be heavy. I wanted to be able to lean on people. There's a few, say, coaching issues at that competition. The guy I had with me cost me a match by not protesting a point. That match would have got me through to the finals, where worst case I'd have been top 3, which then leads on to like Team GB development and stuff if you get really lucky. After that point, I started driving like 3.5 hours each way to go and train at a gym that was sort of affiliated with British Wrestling and Team GB a bit more. And then there was a pandemic, which sort of scuppered everything. I realised that, you know, dealing with, let's say, Olympic sports, you're sort of at the whim of politics, and people who are in favour will always be in favour. And it takes a much more special athlete than I was to do anything with it. So I'd sort of always enjoyed climbing as a kid, so I went out and started climbing. But 125 kilos of climbing, it's a lot to be moving around. It's probably the reason that I fully ruptured a tendon in this finger, partially like tore one in this finger, and had sort of a few knee and ankle issues whilst doing that. Whilst I was climbing, though, to start with, I did my typical stupid thing of stopping eating, essentially giving myself an eating disorder in order to lose weight. But that's just sort of how my head works. If I want to do something, I normally don't want to do it for very long, but I want to put 100% effort into it, especially when it comes to something that is only like dictated by my own suffering. So, you know, when you look at Jane Blakely eating 2 large pizzas, putting olive oil on it, getting all the toppings, eating as much food as you can, you've got C.T. Fletcher taking in double cheeseburgers to bench. You know, when it comes to gaining weight, I was telling the story yesterday to someone of going and eating 2 whole chickens and then getting pork sandwiches on the way home. And I sort of go as extreme with weight loss if I'm left to my own devices. So just dieted really hard, was really tired, and just not really doing that much. I was very fortunate to meet a guy called Johnny Dawes, who the climbers out there will know and really know. He's a legend in British climbing and world climbing, done some of the hardest routes. I mean, at the time, the hardest routes that had ever been done. Even now, they're, you know, sort of mythical status routes, some of them. They hardly ever get repeated. People generally, they're either not good enough or not crazy enough to give them a go. So through meeting Johnny, I got really, like, deep into climbing. Sort of way more than I should have done, probably. I sort of just went total focus on, you know, wanting to do these routes, wanting to climb hard slate routes, big mountain routes, which on reflection is something I still want to do, but I maybe want to do them in a year or 2 years rather than get everything done in the next 5 or 6 months. I think part of me was probably worried that climbing would be something I sort of gave everything to and then just got bored with. So yeah, went fairly hardcore into climbing, dropped down to 110 kilos. So that was like, I think I dropped like 150 pounds. Traveling all around the country, climbing, which someone's asked about, so I'll go into that a little bit later on. But yeah, went really hard into climbing. Realised I wasn't in a good way with what I was eating, because I just wasn't really. So got back in touch with Vicky Masetta, or Tiny Titan as people know her on Instagram, who is someone I've worked alongside as a coach for quite a while, someone who I've coached, someone who has sorted out my nutrition when I fucked myself up regularly. So yeah, spoke to Vicky, got everything in order, was sitting at like 109 kilos. Everything was going good, and then got COVID. So ended up not going out climbing, not training, not walking, and just felt awful. And I think most people, especially people who have been big at some point, realise that it's really easy to eat away being sad. So I was just on the sofa eating shit, eating whatever I wanted, and yeah, just hammering food in, and got up to, I think, about 127, 128 kilos again, which in retrospect maybe wasn't the worst thing to do, because it ended up with me now being back on track with Vicky, eating like 1,000 more calories a day than I was before, and like over 2,000 calories more than I was when I was left to my own devices. So weight's coming down now. You know, I'm really fortunate to be a co-owner of Unit 16 Gym in Sheffield, and I wasn't using my own gym. So through sort of getting my diet back on track, taking a step back from climbing and doing it as something I enjoy rather than something I felt obligated to do, yeah, everything's going good again now. The plan from that point of view is to make sort of sustainable changes, and rather than just trying to lose weight, genuinely trying to just lose fat, train as hard as I can, keep lifting weights, and you know, keep pushing myself, and get weight off slowly whilst trying to keep, you know, a basic level of strength. I think something people haven't realised or don't realise is, you know, it's all well and good coaching people, but you know, when you're dealing with world's strongest man athletes, the kit weighs a lot. So, you know, I was at the point where I was struggling to move kit around because I'd sort of just starved myself and couldn't lift anything. So I couldn't coach people like in person that well because I was getting knackered just loading bars. So I spent a bit of time just feeling really shit about everything. So I got heavy again, then again realised that's not the sensible way to go. So now back on track, trying to get stronger, and just enjoying what I'm doing. Through coaching as well, I've been really fortunate to be contacted by a guy called Rob Graham. His daughter Arwen is a junior stock car racer. She races the Saxos, so like hatchback circuit racing. And I've always, you know, since a kid, loved cars, been interested in cars, enjoy driving at exactly the speed limit at all times, and I'd always thought racing was something that was unattainable, but then through talking to them you realise that all you need is a car and an ARDS licence and an annoying amount of kit to stop you being on fire, but once you've got that sorted, you can race fairly cheaply, you can have fun, and that's the plan at the moment. Currently building up a car to race next year, so trying to get stronger, trying to get my neck stronger again. Obviously when I was wrestling, I trained neck all the time, but yeah, just trying to get that stronger, spending time in the sim, trying to get, you know, more consistent, get faster, learn how to deal with a car that's totally out of control, how to correct it. So just sort of enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. But I'd say that reasonably covers my story as a fat man. I'm just going to very professionally look at my phone. So there is a lot of questions, and there always has been, about how I got involved in coaching, how I got involved with coaching the Stoltmans and people at World's Strongest Man, why some fat guy who doesn't really compete or done a couple of competitions, done some Olympic weightlifting comps, and how I think I can coach people. Generally, the response has been, I can obviously coach them because as of this year, I coach the world's strongest man, Europe's strongest man, Britain's strongest man, Giants Live World Tour final champion, Britain's strongest woman master, various world records in various sports, and a few Team GB athletes in Olympic weightlifting, badminton, loads of other stuff. But that's sort of a bit of an arsey answer and isn't really that helpful. So essentially, I was also fat when I stopped taking drugs, which again we will go into. But in a past life, when I was sort of 16 to 18ish, I was involved in the mountain biking world, photographing things for a website for a magazine called Dirt Magazine, where it's amazing. You get to spend time with people who, now I sit and watch their YouTube channels. I'll sit and watch Matt Jones' YouTube channel, and I've got pictures on an old Facebook account somewhere of Matt and Jono Jones when they were kids racing four-cross. I say kids, we're all pretty much the same age. But it's amazing to see, that world. And I think I'm going to get their names right, but there was Geordie Lunn and Fionn Griffiths, who, I knew from mountain biking, were friends on Facebook and social media and stuff, and I noticed they looked amazing, and I sort of asked them, mountain bikers were either super skinny or a bit skinny fat, but no one was really jacked at that time. It was sort of still on the edge of being a bit of a stoner sport, and the top 1 or 2% would train like athletes, but then people like Rob Warner exist who weren't athletes but kept winning stuff. But these guys looked like ridiculous. They looked really good. They looked, jacked. They were shredded. I asked them, what are you doing? And they said they were doing a thing called CrossFit, which was coming out of America. It's apparently going to be, or is quite a big thing in the States. It was moving over here. People were getting into it. So I found a local CrossFit box, which to me was CrossFit Buxton. I went training there. I was naturally drawn to the Olympic lifts and, powerlifting movements. I wasn't that into walking on my hands or doing pull-ups because I was fat and weak. But you can deadlift, you can, clean and jerk, you can snatch, you can do all of this. And I was pretty bendy, really mobile. So I started coaching some mobility classes, just going through the stuff I was doing myself. And then an old injury flared up that came from the days when I was taking drugs for a hobby. And I ruptured my ACL, tore my MCL and LCL, and had some cartilage and bone hoovered out of my knee, had some stitches in the cartilage, all that sort of stuff. So whilst I was injured, I was a bit bummed. I was still going to train at like 5 a.m. And just doing upper body stuff, because unsurprisingly, fairly obsessive with things. So during that time, I went to Sheffield Hallam University to do a British weightlifting qualification, which then led to me training at the gym at Hallam University. From there was a reasonably strong guy. He was pressing most people's squats. If anyone failed a squat, he'd clean the bar back into the rack for them. I thought, well, I need to get stronger, and he seems really strong, so let's make friends with him. And we both enjoyed eating whole chickens from Nando's and watching weird sports and chatting shit. So we became mates, and he said he's competing at a strongman comp in Newcastle. So I just went up. I, watched strongman all the time as a kid. Massive fan of strongman, but I'd never seen it in person. So I went to the Northern England Strongest Man qualifier at Spennymoor, a gym up there, and Paul was doing quite well in the competition. Chatted to him, and I can't remember what the event was, but I just said, like, why are people doing it this way? It makes sense to do this or something. There's a discussion about an event, which ended up going quite well. And then Paul was putting tacky on for stones. His dad, Alan, didn't want to touch any tacky, so handed me the pot. And Paul ended up winning the stones. Got in my Focus or Fiesta, I think I had at the time. Storming down the motorway. Big trophy. Listening to Vanessa Carlton and a bit of Taylor Swift. And then we got to Sheffield and ended up sat outside a cathedral at 3 a.m-ish, 4 a.m, whenever the sun comes up in summer. And he said, England's strongest man's in X amount of time. I want you to be there for that as well. Very much as at that time just there as a bag bitch, basically. Someone to hold tacky, someone to keep track of the scores. And then I had some ideas about training and said what I think he should do, or what I'd do, or what might work well. And he ended up implementing some of them. I mean, honestly, I've got no idea why. But for some reason, he trusted what I was saying and ended up winning England's, putting in a good Brits performance, going to UK's, doing loads of competitions. But yeah, it basically just came entirely by chance. I wasn't a great athlete. I don't think I'd ever do amazingly well at anything. I think I can be above average in pretty much everything I try to do, but I'm never going to be sort of an elite level athlete myself. But due to whatever type of autism or Asperger's or whatever it is I've got, I see things differently. I'm pretty stubborn about the way I go about things, and whilst I have massive respect for the guys I coach and I'm super fortunate to work with, I don't really care who they are or what they're doing. So if someone can improve, they can improve regardless of what they're doing. Tom came 5th at World's Strongest Man, and I told him it was good, but he should win it. And I gave Big Z advice on his deadlift after he injured his back and stuff like that. So it's sort of a massive amount of respect for the guys and what they do, but I think people stumble by thinking they're being respectful, but in reality they're holding people back. I remember Kurt Kowalski telling a story of, I think it's on a Mark Ripito interview, if anyone wants to search through YouTube for it. He was the first guy to squat 1,000 pounds, and he said anyone who's training with me who just tells me how good they are never actually wants me to succeed. And the first time he squatted 1,000 pounds, apparently his training partner walked up to him and said the squat was good, but you tied your shoes differently, so your shoes look a bit shit. And that sort of stuck with me as a coach. If you only tell people the good parts of their coaching or the good parts of their performance, that's as good as they're going to get. And you probably don't really care about seeing them succeed, seeing what they're capable of doing. So that's sort of how I got into coaching. I tried going to university and disagreed with the lecturers constantly. I tried to do a sports coaching course and left after the first day because it wasn't about sports coaching. It wasn't about making better athletes. It was about making people who can be friendly and chat to people rather than making people win things, which I seem to be reasonably good at, I think. So far it's going fairly well. So that's it, really. That is how I got into coaching in general. What else have we got? Thoughts on strongmen becoming boxers, and who would you like to see fight? I personally think strongmen should be strongmen, and then when they reach the end of their career, they should do Masters Strongman. And then when they get to the end of that, they should retire gracefully and do something to help the sport. Boxing is an incredibly brutal sport. It requires years of training, years of dedication. There's a reason that strongman boxers haven't got into a ring with good fighters or people who weigh the same as them, because super heavyweight boxers would put them to sleep immediately, with absolutely no question. I think it brings a bit of drama and a bit of interest, but I don't think that's necessarily great for the sport. And, people I want to see fight are Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, because that's going to be a really good fight to watch. It's not going to be two people chucking haymakers about and then leaning on each other until one of them gets too tired. That may be me being weirdly cynical and very cynical, but hopefully I'm proved wrong. I know through being lucky enough to spend some time around Eddie Hall when he was training at Strength Asylum and when I was training there, I know he trains like a psychopath. No matter what he's doing, he puts everything into what he's doing. So I don't doubt that he will fight as well as he can, but I don't think it is a boxing match in the same way. An exception to that, who I've seen recently, is Steffi Cohn. She seems to be fighting like a fighter, rather than fighting like a strength athlete who's just strong rather than technically really good, because 99% of the time it doesn't matter how hard you can hit something that's stationary and is wanting you to hit it. But yeah, that's my thought on strongmen being boxers. What else have we got? Top books you currently recommend reading. From a coaching point of view, read Verkhoshansky. Read anything by any athlete from any sport as much as you can. I think a major stumbling point of coaches is to only look at the sport that they're doing. Or as you know, you start studying parkour, you look at the guys who are doing parkour and realise that if they're not jumping well, they can die. You look at people who are sprinting, look at bobsled athletes, you look at, people who are producing maximum force for short periods of time, look at how they're training, look at basketball athletes, look at football players, look at loads of different sports. So from a coaching point of view, that's what I'd say. Generally, Paul Pritchard's book's really good. Johnny Dawes' book is really good. I'm currently slowly working my way through Cosmos, which is good, but a bit hectic. And Your Idiot Brain, also a really interesting book, trying to understand why brains do what they do sometimes, because it's a fucking mess up there, so it's interesting to at least try and understand why. And Amy Ozicki's book as well. I feel really biased recommending it because we work together with the Stoltmans and, we're fairly tightly connected as a coaching group, but annoyingly her book's also really good, so I really recommend it. It's available on Amazon, Google it, you can find that anywhere. But yeah, that's it in terms of books. It's hard to recommend because I just read anything that looks interesting and just want to get into, but I'm also really happy to not read for a few months, or to try and get through a book really quickly, or read 2 or 3 books at the same time, or just bail on one if it doesn't interest me that as much as I thought it was going to. But yeah, the key thing is, especially as coaches and people within sport, is to just learn from as many different sources as possible. What have we got? My personal ambitions for the next 5 years is to have 5 more World's Strongest Man titles be coached by me. Help some people achieve their dreams. I want to climb some big mountain routes. I want to climb some enjoyable, slightly gnarly, adventure trad routes. And I want to race motorcars and have a successful gym, have a successful business, sort of at the risk of being super personal, get out of sort of active debt. I'm one of the people who became a drug addict and live within an overdraft, so it'd be really nice to not do that at some point. But equally, it'd be nice to race cars and travel and do fun things. So sort of made a couple of beds and I'm lying in all of them at the moment. What inspires you most? What inspires me at the moment, and again, it's one of those where it seems really cheesy, but it's spending time with the Staunton brothers and the Mulligan brothers and seeing that if you put loads of work into something, whatever you want to achieve is achievable. And you know, the Mulligans go on about inspiring change, but before I met them, I'd spoke to Luke and he said, like, look, you need to meet these guys. They're fucking wild. They just make stuff happen. Things change when you're around them. And within 2 hours of meeting them, I'd set up as a limited company. We'd sorted some business stuff out at the gym. Like, it just gets done. I've started this podcast. So yeah, it's really inspiring to be around those people. Sort of from a covering like a multitude of ways. At the moment, Ash Sutton is really inspiring as a driver. Same with Jimmy Broadbent. They're guys who have really applied stuff in the sim, took that to driving, and shown that playing video games can make you win things. And they've both had phenomenal seasons. It's been incredible to see. And then some of the strong women doing amazing things. Some of the promoters, seeing how much people put into the sport is really inspiring. It makes it easy to be a part of it. And then the odd message I get or comment on podcast episodes, because to be told, like, YouTube works in a way that, you know, you need 1,000 subscribers at least. You need however many hours of watching to make money from it. And, you know, I'm not there yet. I'd like to be at some point, but, you know, doing the podcast cost me money. And, you know, there was a point where I thought I'd rather have a race car. But then you get the odd comment that says listening to this episode made a difference to someone, and that makes it immediately worthwhile. Is, you know, people listening to this and one person gaining something from it is inspiration enough to want to keep doing it. And yeah, just helping people achieve their dreams as well, because it's fucking amazing to, you know, you see Tom win World's Strongest Man, you know he's wanted to win it for a long time, and, you know, on some level you've played a part in that, and it makes the 8.5 hour drive up to Scotland a lot easier when, you know, you think, going to push Luke as hard as he can next year, going to help Tom, going to keep pushing for titles, and, you know, helping people achieve their dreams is, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Next year's Giants Live events, thoughts and predictions. If they're not a Stoneman, they're not going to be winning. If I do my job properly, I think I've shown that there's a few areas we can work on with both guys. But yeah, they're going to be the lads to be chasing. I think it's going to be really interesting to see some of the new guys coming up. Shane Flowers put in a great performance. Des Gahan as well. Gav Bilton coming back for Brits is going to be really exciting. Speaking to Paul Smith, making some equipment changes. Finally, I think he should be getting a suit. Hopefully he'll get in a suit, because it'll be interesting to see how he can perform. So it's hard, because he's not a newcomer in any way, but it sort of feels like he's going to be pushing really hard. So I think Brits is going to be amazing. It's in February next year as well. And then seeing what people can do. Evan Singleton looks good. Alexei coming back just every year, every competition getting better and better. But from my point of view, and being as biased as possible, it's Stormont 1 and 2 every event, because if it's not, I've fucked up in some way. So I'm going to give them every opportunity I can and make them the people to chase. Climbing in the UK. Rock climbing in the UK is amazing. Mainly because we have the Peak District. Stanage is one of the best crags probably in the world. If you're into proper rock climbing, getting trad, getting nearly blown off in a ret, getting covered in awfulness, but also having perfect, like, sculptural rock. Pebble pulling, balancy slabs, splitter cracks. It's just, the Peak District grit, either side of it is incredible to climb. And then I've only climbed a couple of places in Scotland, climbed on some Scottish conglomerate, which is basically just rock that's been glued together by like pebbles and stuff. It's interesting to climb on. It's really 3D, but it's also fairly temporary. Holds break all the time and it's a bit shit. And climbed at Ratho Quarry, which was really good fun. It felt like a mashup between limestone and gritstone. It wasn't super pulley, but it's quite balancy. Really interesting rock to climb on. And then there's Wales, which, if anyone's into climbing, walking, looking at stuff, go to Wales. Round Clonberis in the pass, over to Dramatic and down the coast, and there's Snowdon, obviously, and Clogwyn Darathri. You're climbing on there and you feel incredibly insignificant. I sort of hung out on a belay with a cup of tea a few hundred feet off the floor, looking out across a lake, and realised that put a lot of faith in a couple of fairly sketchy nuts, and that was fine because you sort of get welcomed into the rock. It's a very awe-inspiring place to be. It's terrifying to be, but when you're really there, you can understand who you are and what you're about. And the slate quarries are amazing. They're man-made and made, by the Welshmen who were brutally treated by the English, and it amazes me that the majority of locals welcome us back in, and we get to climb there, and it's incredible. The slate is beautiful. You hear rock fall now and again, and it sounds like the world's coming in. You can go through the tunnels, the history there, the people who've climbed there, John Redhead, Johnny Dawes. You get some of, like, Nick Ditson's routes. There's just, the rock there is, it's unbelievable. John Sylvester's routes are just perfect. The rainbow is one of the most beautiful bits of rock there is, and we can just climb it. So, yeah, climbing in the UK is amazing. I do think people need to remember that rock climbing is fun, and you don't need to be an arsehole, but I think that's also the same in almost every sport. How many clients do you have? 30-ish. Like, I try and cap it, and then someone will ask me for coaching, and if I think they're really worth coaching, or there's someone who is going to put the effort in, then I'll just extend the cap, which is a fairly shit business idea. But it's also the reason I've set, like, working hours, because I was waking up in the morning and checking my phone because I've got clients in the States, and so now I've sort of tried to set actual times to work like an adult, which is a lot better. But yeah, 30-ish, but yeah, there's no limit. Sometimes it drops as people come to the end of training cycles. I'm fairly expensive because I try and limit numbers. So sometimes it doesn't become affordable, but so long as people have been with me over 3 months, they always have a place, and people I coach will always pay the price they first signed up with. So some people are paying the price that I was charging 5 years ago when I didn't know what to charge, and some people aren't. So that's just, yeah, people put a lot of trust in me, so I try and repay their loyalty by not hiking prices up on people who are already with me. What else have we got? Just general interests. I am really into motor cars, racing cars. I'm really looking forward to going racing next year. Hopefully, if some deliveries come together, I can get some testing done this year. Ideally, before we head off to Florida for the Strongman Games, but perhaps not. But I've sort of reached a point where I'm not in a rush. I've got a fairly shit sim setup, but it does the job-ish. I can't left foot brake too hard. I can't heel and toe too hard because the whole thing moves. But, you know, sort of sitting in podium places on iRacing. But as a rookie, you can be sitting in a podium and then someone decides not to bother turning corners and will run you off the road. Also, rock climbing and training. I sort of have a lot going on, but I'm not that complicated. I just, from a sporting point of view, really enjoy anyone who's good at sport. I don't really care what that sport is, so long as they're good at it. So, I was watching Dawes the other day, which is Norwegian high diving. Watch a lot of rugby, American football, basketball. Just enjoy seeing anyone who's good at what they do. Really into watching the Stora guys and Dom Tomato, who are some parkour athletes. Everyone will have either seen them because they've done a lot of stunt double work, or seen clips on Lad Bible stuff. But yeah, I'm really inspiring to see those guys who are doing really good stuff, and they're really good at what they do. So a lot of those are what got you into coaching. Experiences through life. Yeah, that's a lot. So I grew up sort of in Leicestershire for a reasonable part of my life. Living a bit of a farming life. My mum worked super hard. We lived with my step family at the time. Lived like a country life, I suppose. Went to a small school, knew everyone, knew all the teachers. Like, everyone knew everyone. I would occasionally just not bother going to school. If my mate's family had harvest on and stuff like that, you'd go and help them, or say you were going to go and help them, and go look at burnt out cars, or go and play football, go and ride horses, do, you know, normal, like, 18th century gypsy child stuff. But that's just how we grew up. We were in the countryside, and it was really good fun. Then I started going to a private school for the last 2 years of junior school. That was up in Cheshire, so I was travelling quite a lot, staying with my grandmother at the time. That was sort of alright. Again, didn't really bother going to school too much, or as much as I could get away with it. Do as little work as possible, fight quite a lot, but started playing rugby and realised that rugby is something I really enjoyed doing. Then went to senior school, discovered you look really cool if you start smoking, and then discovered that smoking pot was pretty ace, so invested quite a lot of time into that, and would ride mountain bikes, ride BMXs, ride mini motorbikes around the back garden, nicking pallets from building sites to build jumps, building trails, doing all that sort of stuff, you know, getting stoned in the woods and riding push bikes. I did my GCSEs. I ended up teaching myself some of the subjects because I didn't agree with the teachers. Got reasonably good results, and then we moved to a place called Leek in Staffordshire, which is near Stoke-on-Trent, and I decided I would put as much effort as possible into being an arsehole. So got really into taking drugs at that point. Was riding BMX bikes all the time. I'd sort of stopped playing rugby. I was fed up with everything. And then that was what I was doing. Spent quite a while just trying to fuck up as much as I could. And then went to Birmingham. I stopped with my sisters and their mum. My half sisters, I should say, who put up with a lot of shit. I was working a reasonable job and spending all my money on drinking very heavily. Then went to Australia for a few months to visit family, and I think to give people a break. And went out there, sort of got my shit together a little bit. Came back to Leek, started working in a pub, which was an amazing thing to be doing. Really enjoyed working there, enjoyed the people, enjoyed the customers. You're sort of bonding with people. You can be really nerdy in a real ale pub as well. You start worrying about what temperature a cellar is, and what pollen's in the air, and you can get really into it, which sort of suited my brain. Was sort of gradually getting into drinking more and more, smoking, taking Class A's, doing that sort of stuff. And then when I left the pub, had a bit of a spiral, got fairly into taking a variety of Class A's, taking pills, taking any downers really. Smoked heroin on and off, a little bit of crack now and again. But I'd say that was more to try it out on nights out rather than getting into it. Just tried to fuck myself up fairly well. So from there, my mum at that time was living and working in Guernsey, so I went out there to try and clean up. Worked in a pub, got into drinking and smoking pot there. And then really sort of got my shit together, started working in a quarry, in a workshop. And whilst I was working at the quarry, that's where I started doing CrossFit, that's where I got into training. And then when I had time off for my ACL surgery, I just never went back to the quarry. I don't think I really didn't enjoy being there. You'd go to work in the dark, you'd work in the bottom of a hole in the dark. You'd leave in the dark, and the manager of the workshops was a massive arsehole. Uniquely one of the worst people I have ever met. Just a very terrible person to be around. Really awful to work for, which was a shame because the lads in the workshop, the other managers, union reps, all of those guys were incredible. An absolutely amazing group of lads to be around. You'd have fun, you'd do everything exactly to health and safety standards and never fill Coke cans with oxyacetylene and see how much they explode, and never make firing bearings down a workshop with airlines and stuff like that. But it was really good fun, really enjoyable to be there. But then that's when I started coaching, and that is what got me into coaching. But yeah, my journey as a person has been, one of obsession and addiction, pretty much all the way through, with something, regardless of what it is. So that's why at the moment I am trying to spend my time going training regularly but not obsessively, going climbing regularly but not obsessively, getting into racing. But when I first had the thought of building my track car, I was obsessed that things weren't here right now, and I was being held up by stuff not being delivered. But I've made the effort for my own mental health and the people who are helping me, to remember that there's a global pandemic, and people made the brilliant idea to leave the EU, so supply chains are slightly fucked. So me having to wait an extra week or two for a roll cage, in the grand scheme of things, isn't the worst thing. But if someone wants to send me some Huskenwald pedals for the sim rig and a better chair, maybe like a Fanatec steering wheel and a better computer. That'd be good. That'd take the stress off. But as it is, we are where we are, and just keep on keeping on. And it's really exciting to get to go to the racing next week after, going to Brands Hatch to watch the juniors race again, see how Arwen gets on, see some of the trucks. I think they're racing as well, and racing trucks is something I've been really looking forward to seeing in person, because it sort of annoys me why deliveries are late when you see racing trucks go round, because the guys driving those are psychopaths. It's going to be incredible to see. Really looking forward to getting to watch that. Right, what else have we got? So I thought it'd be really smart and screen record my phone whilst I scrolled through. But what I did was scroll quicker than I can read. Mental health and prep in sports. So, and what is it? Dialing in before a big lift. So, mental state for strongman. For 99.9% of people listening or watching this, it should be fun. For pretty much all of the time. If you're not enjoying it, you're not getting paid to do it. This isn't your job. So you should do something you enjoy. That might be, I can't be bothered training like this today, I'm going to train legs instead. If you have a coach and a training plan and stuff like that, you should stick to that more or less 100% of the time. And if you're not going to, you should talk to your coach about that as well. But the mental state should be one of enjoyment up until the point that the sport becomes a job, and then it becomes a job. And sometimes you just have to go in and you have to get things done. And that's part of the job of a coach, is to mean that the numbers you're asking people to do are something they're capable of doing. And it might be hard for them to do, but they should be capable of doing it. So then you send them into the gym and they just have to do work. In terms of getting psyched up for a big lift, I think a lot of people forget that the graph for arousal and sports performance has the other side. You can't just keep getting psyched up. Eventually it falls off a cliff and your performance will go downhill. So if you're already feeling psyched up for a lift, you don't need loads of smelling salts. Just carry on. That's why you see some people with the lid off the salts, waving them around, because that makes them a lot weaker. It means that you can have the ritual of smelling salts without that sort of hit of aggression that comes with them. I think what I do when I have a max lift coming up is I just listen to something that makes me feel emotional, and then turn that emotion into wanting to lift really hard. I wish there was a massive secret to it. I wish I could say, oh, just think about this and you'll do better. You know, there's theories about thinking about your kids, thinking about someone you love being trapped and having to save them. But, you know, it's just think about not failing, because failing's really shit. And yeah, just go in putting 100% effort in. I think people generally don't put all the effort in because they don't want to fail. But if you just go into a lift refusing to fail and put 100% effort in, when you reflect afterwards, you can say, yeah, I put 100% effort in and I made the lift, or I put 100% effort in and I didn't make the lift, which means you need to be stronger or technique broke down, so it's easy to analyse. But if you're not putting that effort into the lift and you're not willing to push yourself, then it's just not going to work at all. You know, I've seen some strong people fail lifts basically because they just didn't try to lift it. Yeah, I put on Disturbed and then Slipknot and lift fairly well, but I'll also put on like Pachelbel's Canon or some classical, or Hobo Johnson and the Lovemakers, and just chill out and lift, because lifting school, and if you enjoy it, you'll lift more. I think people try and be angry and go to war when in reality the majority of people are doing their hobby in a car park. So should be something you enjoy, and you can get angry for one lift, but after that, yeah, you don't need to be fired up all the time. How did I go about approaching Tom and Luke to coach them? I've known Tom for a long time, since going to UK's Strongest Man with Paul. Always chatted to Tom, always got on. Sort of was a bit of an arsehole to him, in the sense that, you know, back in the day, he was young, he was an immature athlete, he was, you could maybe manipulate him a little bit, you could say things, get in his head, but that was only on comp day. The rest of the time I really enjoy chatting to Tom and being around him. He went out to World's Strongest Man, all his kit got lost, and for some reason I thought, you know, this just isn't on. Like, it's not fair for someone to be at World's Strongest Man and maybe not perform because they didn't have their kit. So I started calling people, trying to help him, trying to get hold of kit for him for Worlds. I think that's the year he came 5th, and I ended up speaking to him and said that wasn't good enough. He should be winning it. Said I'll coach him for free for a few months, sort of give me a chance, and then put over 20 kilos on his deadlift in those 3 months, and yeah, just went from there. Really, I took a chance, backed myself, and then made myself really stressed, but determined to deliver on what I said I was going to deliver. And then with Luke, I don't really want to speak out of turn, but I think he was maybe a bit lost as an athlete. I was coaching Tom, and then he was doing bits of Tom's training, bits of what I was setting for Tom, and I sent him a message and just said, look, you're better off letting me program for you, because you and Tom are different athletes, you have different weaknesses, you're not living up to your potential. So that was, I want to say, like 8 to 12 weeks before World's Strongest Man, where Luke put in a phenomenal performance, and then since then he's won Europe. So I mean, hopefully I'm stuck with them and they're stuck with me for a while, but at the end of the day, my main interest is the people I care about performing as well as they can, and if at some point that means turning around and saying, I think this person might be a better fit as a coach, or they might be able to do this, then that's what I'll do. But at the moment, I think, I can still help them achieve more, keep pushing, keep winning stuff, and yeah, just keep showing what they're capable of doing. And by the time this goes up, fairly soon, Rogue will be on, so it'll be interesting to see how they perform, because Britain's Strongest Man was a fairly brutal event, and that was 6 days ago. So yeah, I'm really excited to watch Rogue, really excited to see Martins and Mateusz and Alexei go head to head as well, and see where the lads fit in there whilst they're maybe not perfectly peaked for a competition. Oh, that is below lukewarm coffee. I've been chatting shit for like an hour and didn't expect that to be that cold. Do you think Tom will surpass Eddie Hall's 5 times Britain's Strongest Man record? Probably. If Tom wants to win an event, he will win it as many times as he wants to win it, which is a brilliant thing to do. It's a brilliant mindset to have. It can be frustrating, because if he's not 100% committed to winning something, he can turn up and look a little bit like a novice. He's still, one of the best in the world, but he's not got that, I'm just going to win it. I said to a few people that watching Tom walk out at Britain's Strongest Man this year, he was the person to beat, because he walked out like a champion. So yeah, if Tom wants to win it 5 or more times, Tom will do. But, who knows what he wants to do. I think World's Strongest Man's, more of those titles are going to be really good. Europe's Strongest Man's still out there. There's Rogue, there's the Arnold, there's so much in Strongman. I think you need to be smart with what you're doing. So he's capable of winning it as many times as he wants to, but I wouldn't want to put pressure on him to win so many times. Overcoming a climbing plateau. Climbing is fun. You should enjoy it. If you're stuck on something, then do something else. Because again, the majority of people aren't getting paid to do it, and those who are getting paid for it, the majority of them do what the fuck they want. I got stuck trying a route on the slate, so I just fucked off and went and climbed some fun stuff. Did a bit of soloing, played about, and just climbed. If it's a strength issue, fingerboard, train, lose weight, but you don't necessarily need to lose weight if you get stronger. If it's a technique thing, just play. Climb one-handed, climb no-handed. Look at Johnny Dawes climb, do what he does. Because if you enjoy climbing, you can move really well. And you can generally out-technique strength a lot of the time. Unless it's super steep stuff, then you've just got to get stronger, unfortunately. Let's think. What non-strength sports could learn from strength sports? That most of them aren't very strong. Strong climbers are fairly weak. There's a couple who are, I think Yves Gravel, I think is his name, strong as fuck. But he's still not like really strong. He's like the strongest climber by a long way. But you know, you've got 80 odd kilo men who are deadlifting like 140 and they're classed as strong climbers, or you know, cyclists. Depending on the type of cycling, people say people are strong, but they're just not. So yeah, learn what actual strength is, and then realise that it's not the 1950s and you're not going to end up muscle bound and not able to move. You can just get stronger, and being strong is never a bad thing. As Mark Bow says, strength is never a weakness. What have we got? When you shouldn't be rolling in a barbell in deadlifts. If you are too fat to set up at the bottom of a lift, or you're too immobile to set up properly at the bottom of a lift, roll the bar away so you have enough room to fit into deadlift. If that's not the case, don't roll the bar, because linear motion doesn't just become vertical motion. You're rolling a bar in one way, you won't just lift it up quicker. That's not how physics works. If you're in a suit, rolling it can be useful because suits are pretty terrible to be in. But generally, unless you physically have to roll the bar, don't bother rolling the bar. It's pointless. Plan with the Stoneman's grip, Luke's deadlift. Luke got a PB at Brits on deadlift, and Tom's grip's better than it's ever been. So just keep doing that, really. Yeah, I don't want to go too much into what the plans are, because there are some weird hippie sort of weirdnesses I like to get people to do. But yeah, that's not going to be an issue. Come World's Strongest Man next year, we're going to have both of them on the podium. That's not really a question. Someone's going to have to be good to get between them. Entering first comp, find one, enter it. It's, you know, at the risk of sounding like an arsehole, find a comp that you can get to easily, that isn't going to cost you loads of money, and enter it and have fun, because Strongman's fucking ace. So just go and do it, and you could zero every event, but you'll have a brilliant day. You could win, and you'll have a brilliant day. Just go and enjoy it. Don't put loads of pressure on yourself. Realise that you're doing a hobby, and if it's any other hobby and it made you feel like shit, you'd stop doing it. So just enter a comp, go, have fun. Don't put pressure on yourself, and just go and do it. The 206 build. Currently, the 206 is a shell. It has a load of stuff ripped out of it. I am looking for someone to reprogram the ECU to get the immobilizer chipped out of it. Get all of that sort of stuff sorted. I'm picking up my seat on Monday, so in a couple of days, and then I'm waiting for my cage to get delivered, and then I can finally get all of the parts of a race car out of the kitchen and put it back together. But with no longer wanting to do the 206 production cup and rather just racing it as a tin top, it means that I am going to strip it out even more. It's going to have full polycarbonate windows other than the windscreen. Maybe do the rear window at some point, but they're expensive. Get it remapped, get the immobilizer removed, get rid of as much dash as possible, maybe get like a nice flock dash in. I'd love to have like a race computer rather than like dial stuff, but car electronics are wizardry. But yeah, it's going good. It's sort of stuck at the moment. It's out of my hands, but it's going to be very quick when it's time to get it going. But I'm licensed. I've got the majority of my kit. Still need a hands device and a race suit, but other than that, as soon as it's ready, it is time to go racing, and I cannot wait. What's your plan for befriending Matty Matheson? I don't have one, but if anyone knows Matty Matheson and he wants to be friends and he wants to get stronger, he wants to get fitter, then tell him to slide into those DMs, because there are a few people in this world who I genuinely think I just want to meet them for the sake of meeting them. I've not been able to meet yet. There's Matty Matheson, Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura, and they just seem like really fucking cool guys. So if anyone has a way of sorting that out, that would be sweet. Weirdest music you've had on while training? Probably the weirdest thing is nothing. Sometimes I don't agree with having music on. I think the sound of your own mediocrity should be enough to motivate you. But people probably it just makes you sound like an arsehole. But if you need music on to train, then you should probably address your internal monologue a bit better. Common mistakes you see with coaches? Well, throwing loads of shit at a wall and hoping some of it will stick. I think coaches fall into the trap of feeling like they need to justify themselves as coaches. So rather than building a really solid process and getting good results, what they do is getting people to do loads of shit, generally getting injured, and then doing loads of other weird shit to help an injury, instead of keeping it fairly basic, realising that, you know, some weirdness is good, but you don't need to do loads of mad shit to get stronger. The lads have got to where they are through fairly simple training with a bit of weirdness thrown in, but they work really hard. So I think a lot of coaches try and satisfy their own ego or their own sort of lack of trust in their own coaching by doing too much weird shit for the sake of it. Also, don't just look at the sport you're doing. Coach people with a basis of every sport and pick the best people out of that to follow. That is just toss. Thoughts on psychology in relation to sports performance? It is one of the most important things. Nutrition, coaching, psychology. If all those three things are nailed, you will perform better. It's that simple. There's no reason, there's no need to complicate it. Those three things are good, performances are better. If your coaching's nailed, your nutrition's nailed, but you mentally feel like shit, you won't perform. It's probably got a relatively small increase if psychology, you know, if you're not nailing psychology specifically, but you're performing quite well, then nailing it might not have a massive effect. But if you're not nailing it and you feel like shit, you will perform badly. It's really simple. The strongest guys in the world can turn up to a show, not want to compete, not be in a good mental state, and they will not perform. So yeah, speak to psychologists, and follow Amy Zicki as well. She puts some really good stuff out. What else have we got? Unit 16. Unit 16 is doing amazingly well. Shiv is essentially running it. She's running her classes out of there, and she's kicking ass. She's doing a really good job. The gym isn't a gym. It's sort of a training space. We have a few people there. Generally, they're elite athletes or want to be elite athletes or don't want to train in normal gyms. So it's not a public space. It's a nice, quiet place. You can just go and get strong. And you can do some weird stuff as well. We've got some amazing athletes who do some slightly unconventional training methods, and it's a space where they can just do it. They block it out for themselves, and they're not going to get disturbed in there. Which also leads on to how me and Shiv met through the gym, training at Hallam, I think, probably at Tramlines or something, and then known each other ages, and then just through the gym, and through both of us having a bit of a shit time, I think we realised that we make each other happy, and probably need to remember that more often. How many changes do you need to make for Stormont to have a year like 2021? They did do. They've had a year like 2021. It was this year, and it was fucking sick. But yeah, there's bits we can do. There's always room for improvement. There's nothing massive we need to do. But yeah, next year will be better. So good luck to everyone else, because it's going to be fucking wild. What have we got here? How did you get started? Your journey to becoming the best strongman coach in the world. I coach the best athletes in the world, so it's really easy for me to be the best coach because they're fucking amazing. I don't think, I'm the best at anything, to be honest. I just do my job, and it just so happens that the people I do that job with keep winning stuff. So yeah, I appreciate it, but I do my own thing, and it seems to work reasonably well. What's it like after the shows? After most shows, people go to bed, might have a couple of beers or a couple of drinks in a bar, get a pizza, go to bed. Because what they've done is the hardest competitions in the world, so they're probably pretty tired. There's normally one show a year where everyone will get a bit pissed, but with the schedule this year, it was a bit iffy. Glasgow was good fun though, because Scottish people are mental. So yeah, got a few whiskies in after that one, but generally building for something fairly soon. This year it's been a really quick turnaround, so not been able to afford days off through being hungover. Maybe touch on PEDs in the sport. People take drugs, some people don't take drugs. The majority of novice and amateur strongmen and strong women at the moment, slightly more worryingly, take way more gear than they should because they think drugs are magic and will make you stronger than just hard work will. So what they do is take loads of gear, get injured, and then take more gear and keep doing that. Instead of speaking to either doctors or people who are medically trained or people who are in the sport or nutritionists who can help them with it, there's loads of information. There's loads of really interesting, really knowledgeable people. There's people who can help you get blood work done. There's people who can check your health markers, people who can test gear for you to make sure you're actually taking stuff, that it says what it is, because a lot of it is made by some toothless fuckwit in a bathtub, and then you just shove it into your body because that's what you think people do. But the reality of it is the guys at World's Strongest Man are going to be the strongest people in the world anyway, whether they take drugs or not. So if no one anywhere took drugs, they would still be the strongest in the world because they work harder, their nutrition's perfect, genetically they're mostly freaks, and the ones who aren't genetic freaks work harder than anyone in the world will ever work at anything, because that's what elite sport is about. I think too many people think taking gear will make you compete at that level. I think it's irresponsible of coaches to recommend it to people. I think it's irresponsible of people to suggest what to take and how much of it unless they have some either medical background or in a very, very few cases have been around long enough that they've essentially fuck themselves up so you don't have to. But the most important piece of advice you can give anyone about taking gear is stop taking advice from drug dealers on what drugs you should buy, because they do not have your best interests at heart. What they have is a surplus of drugs and people who will trust them, and they will sell them those drugs. But it really is that simple. If you're not already sleeping perfectly, your nutrition's perfect, your training's perfect, technique's perfect, drugs will not make you better. They will not just fix it. You have to be willing to work harder than anyone for there really to be much point in doing it. Equally, that's fairly hypocritical as someone who used to be a drug addict. However, if you want to take some drugs, do it. But understand that it's not going to fix everything for you. It's just masking whatever issues you've got going on. I think that's about it. I think I've ranted at people enough. I think I've shouted a reasonable amount. And I think I've been nice and preachy. But yeah, slightly weird episode. I think next week I'm either going to do something similar. Hopefully I can arrange to get together with someone to do a proper episode again. But I might have a break next week. I might do it by myself again. People let me know what you want. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that toss. And yeah, thank you for listening, guys. It's been interesting.